the vast expanse of Middle-earth, where the lands are ruled by ancient powers, where kingdoms rise and fall in the shadows of the past, there lies a deep and often terrifying truth. Much of the history that shapes the world is known to only a few. Among these few, there are none more enigmatic than Gandalf the Grey. He, whose wisdom has illuminated the darkest paths for the free peoples of Middle-earth, has walked the land for centuries. Yet even he, revered and feared, harbors truths that remain buried, hidden deep within the folds of his long life. The great struggle against Sauron, the Dark Lord, is the story that will forever define the age. Yet behind this fight, in the darkest corners of Gandalf's mind, there are truths few have ever known. For centuries, he has kept silent on certain matters, refraining from sharing the full extent of what he knows about Sauron. Why did Gandalf, a wizard whose guidance shaped the fate of kingdoms, withhold the most crucial knowledge about Sauron's rise to power? What was so dangerous about the truths he guarded? The questions linger, unanswered and shrouded in mystery. This tale seeks to shed light on those very secrets. We will journey through Gandalf's early years, through his time as a wanderer, uncovering the knowledge he kept to himself, the decisions he made, and the reasoning behind his silence. It is a journey into the shadows of his mind, where the fate of Middle-earth was shaped not only by what Gandalf chose to reveal, but by what he chose to hide. From the first whispers of the necromancer to the eventual unveiling of Sauron's full power, we will uncover the hidden truths that have remained buried for so long. The true nature of Gandalf's understanding of Sauron is far more complex than many realize. For in those deep recesses of Gandalf's thoughts, the power of knowledge and the burden of it held sway over all he did. In the early days of Gandalf's journey through Middle-earth, whispers of a shadow stretching across the land began to surface. This was long before Sauron revealed himself openly as the Dark Lord. At the time, Gandalf was still a newcomer in a world of ancient beings and ageless conflicts. His arrival as one of the Astari, wizards sent by the Valor to help guide Middle-earth, was intended to be subtle. Gandalf, Olorin in his former life, was not meant to lead, but to observe, to inspire, to nudge the free peoples into action when the time was right. But the whispers he heard of the necromancer, a shadowy figure growing in power in the dark forests of Mirkwood, made him uneasy. The land was shifting, and he could feel it. A great darkness was rising. But at that time, he did not yet know the full extent of its danger. At first, the rumors were sparse, drifting through Middle-earth like dark smoke. Few believed them. Even fewer dared to speak of them. Yet Gandalf knew better. As he traveled through the lands of the free peoples, he began to see signs, the land growing darker, the creatures that once roamed freely becoming twisted and restless. Mirkwood, once a vibrant and thriving forest, was changing. Its trees seemed to grow darker, very air heavy with something unnatural. And at the heart of it all, Dal Guldur, an ancient fortress of forgotten power, stood in oppressive silence. Gandalf, ever the perceptive wanderer, made his way to the forest's edge. There, he encountered Thranduil, the elven king, who had long been aware of the growing darkness. But even Thranduil, noble and wise as he was, could not fully grasp the scope of the threat. His people had always been cautious of the darkness, but there was something about Dal Guldur that sent shivers through even his immortal heart. Though Thranduil could feel the growing power, he, like many others, could not yet place it. He could not fathom the full depth of the evil that was rising within the fortress. In his travels, Gandalf encountered other figures, like Elrond of Rivendell and Galadriel of Lothlorien, who shared his growing unease. Though they all recognized the need for action, they remained cautious, for none of them, not even the wise Elrond or the ever-watchful Galadriel, knew the full truth about the necromancer. They saw only shadows, ripples in a vast pond. It was not until Gandalf's deeper investigation, through ancient texts and hidden knowledge, that he began to piece together the truth. The necromancer was not just a power vying for control. He was the Dark Lord himself, Sauron in disguise. And yet, despite this discovery, Gandalf held back. Though he understood the true nature of the threat, he chose not to share it. He had his reasons not born of fear, but of caution. He knew that revealing the full truth about Sauron's return soon could cause panic, fracture the already fragile alliances, and send the free peoples into disarray. But even as he withheld the full scope of his knowledge, a deep unease began to take root in his heart. How long could he keep this secret? How long could he bear the burden of knowing that Sauron's return was inevitable, that the very land was slowly being corrupted by the Dark Lord's influence? The people of Middle-earth, the elves and men, were not yet ready to hear the truth. They had been lulled into a false sense of security, believing that their long-held traditions and histories would protect them from the encroaching shadow. But Gandalf knew better. The free peoples of Middle-earth, though brave and noble, were divided. They could not yet see the enormity of the coming war, the scope of the evil they were about to face. And so Gandalf, despite his knowledge, remained silent. His silence, though, was not one of indifference or lack of action. He began to work in secret, gathering allies, preparing for the inevitable conflict that was about to unfold. Through his quiet influence, Gandalf helped shape the formation of the White Council, the group of wise leaders who would one day confront Sauron's power. And yet, even here, Gandalf kept his knowledge close. He did not reveal the full truth to Saruman, the head of the council, nor did he fully share his understanding with Galadriel or Elrond. He knew that Saruman, in particular, was too consumed by his own ambitions to be trusted with the full truth. As the years passed, and the shadow continued to grow. Gandalf could no longer ignore the mounting pressure. The truth about Sauron's return would not be hidden forever. But when would the time be right to reveal it? When would the free peoples of Middle-earth be ready to face the greatest evil they had ever known? It was a question that haunted Gandalf, even as he continued his quiet work in the background, preparing for the day when the full extent of the danger would be revealed. In the depths of his soul, Gandalf knew one thing: Sauron's return was inevitable. The question was not if, but when. And when that time came, would Middle-earth be ready? Would they understand the full weight of the darkness they were about to face? Would they be ready to stand together, united, against the evil that had once nearly consumed the world? The burden of knowledge was a heavy one, and Gandalf's internal struggle would shape the future of Middle-earth. As he moved through the lands, working in the shadows, the question remained: when would the truth come to light? And when it did, would Middle-earth be ready to face the darkness, or would it crumble beneath the weight of the truth? Gandalf's heart was heavy with these thoughts, for he knew that the fate of all the free peoples rested not just in their strength or courage, but in their ability to unite against the coming storm. And that was something Gandalf could not force. It was something they would have to choose, and choose wisely. The shadow of Sauron grew ever larger in Gandalf's mind, the weight of its presence heavy upon his heart. As he moved through Middle-earth, seeking answers, the mystery surrounding the Dark Lord deepened in ways Gandalf had not anticipated. What began as a whisper in the dark, a name heard in fleeting conversations, had become an undeniable force. Sauron's power, once thought defeated, was not only immense, but ancient, older than the very earth itself. The more Gandalf investigated, the more he uncovered about the Dark Lord's influence, and the more he realized that Sauron's return was tied to something far darker than he had initially suspected. The One Ring. The discovery sent tremors through Gandalf's soul. The ring was no mere artifact. It was the heart of Sauron's power. Its creation, its history, the way it had been lost to time, it was all intricately tied to Sauron's ability to bend the world to his will. Gandalf could feel its call, an invisible thread that stretched across the world, beckoning. Yet, he knew that if Sauron ever regained control of the ring, the world would fall under an age of darkness that might never end. In his travels, Gandalf began to piece together the ring's history, a tale as old as the world itself. It was forged in the fires of Mount Doom, an instrument of absolute power, and it had once been lost, hidden from the eyes of the world. But the ring, it seemed, was not meant to remain hidden forever. As Gandalf delved deeper into the history of the ring, he discovered its connection to Numenor, the ancient kingdom of men, and the fall of its proud civilization. The ring had corrupted the hearts of kings, driven men to madness, and shattered the very foundations of entire civilizations. The dug, the more he realized that Sauron's power was not merely in his armies or his minions. It was in the very essence of the ring itself. He met with Elrond and Galadriel, who shared their suspicions, but even they seemed cautious. The elves had seen the ring's power firsthand, and their knowledge, though vast, was tainted with their own sorrow. For them, the ring was a painful memory, a reminder of their failures. Gandalf could feel the tension, the reluctance to speak the truth aloud. Even in their wisdom, there was fear, a fear of Sauron's return, of what the ring could do if it ever came into the wrong hands. But Gandalf knew that fear, though natural, could not be allowed to fester. The threat was real. He could no longer deny the shadow that loomed over Middle-earth, and the more he tried to act in the shadows, the more Sauron's presence made itself known. Strange occurrences, disturbing signs, creatures long thought to be myths reappearing, whispers of the dead, unnatural winds, and storms that swept through the land. All these things were signs of Sauron's resurgence, a herald of the darkness that was once again stirring. Still, despite all that he knew, Gandalf kept the truth to himself. He hesitated. How could he tell the people of Middle-earth what he knew when they were not yet ready to hear it? He had seen the fear and doubt in the eyes of his allies. He knew the free peoples would not rally in time if the full weight of the truth was unleashed upon them. The burden of this knowledge weighed heavily upon Gandalf's heart. How could he bear it alone, knowing the fate of Middle-earth hung in the balance, yet unable to share the burden with those who would stand beside him? As Gandalf sought answers, the mystery of the ring continued to unfold, its terrible significance becoming clearer with each passing day. The whispers of the ring's existence grew louder, and Gandalf could no longer ignore the mounting pressure. His suspicions were confirmed when he learned that the ring had been found by none other than Bilbo Baggins, a hobbit from the Shire. The knowledge that the ring was now in the possession of one so small, so unsuspecting, filled Gandalf with dread. How could such an innocent soul be tasked with carrying such a heavy burden? But even in this moment of clarity, Gandalf struggled. How could he tell Frodo Baggins, the ring-bearer, the true nature of the ring? How could he reveal to him the awful truth, that the fate of the world now rested on his small, unassuming shoulders? It was a truth Gandalf had carried in silence for so long, and it was one that he feared would destroy the very hope that had kept him going. The task ahead was too great for any one person, and Gandalf's mind raced with the questions that could not yet be answered. He turned to the White Council, seeking their guidance, hoping that they would see the truth he had uncovered. Elrond, Galadriel, and Saruman, all of them knew the history of the ring. But even Saruman, the head of the council, seemed wary, clouded by his own ambition. He wanted the power of the ring for himself. Saruman, Gandalf knew, was already too far gone, driven by the same hunger for control that had once consumed Sauron. that moment, Gandalf understood that even his closest allies were not immune to the corrupting influence of Sauron's will. The rising conflict within Gandalf was not just external, it was internal. He had learned the truth, uncovered the dark secrets that had remained hidden for so long. But with that knowledge came a terrible burden. The ring, the very key to Sauron's power, was now in the hands of the Free Peoples, but they were unprepared for the weight it carried. Gandalf's growing sense of urgency deepened. Sauron's return was not just a threat, it was an inevitability. And yet, Gandalf knew that the struggle to defeat him would not be one of force alone, but of will. With every step he took, the burden of knowledge grew heavier. The truth about Sauron and the ring was undeniable. Yet, Gandalf understood that revealing it would risk tearing apart the fragile alliances that had been formed. The power of the ring was more than a weapon. It was a test of the hearts and minds of those who would use it. Gandalf could not bear to see Middle-earth fall under the sway of Sauron again. Yet as the shadows gathered, he knew that the coming war would require not only power, but a unity that had never been seen before. In his heart, Gandalf struggled with the weight of what he knew. The truth was now a burden he could no longer ignore, but the cost of revealing it seemed too high. The more he uncovered about Sauron's power, the more he realized how fragile their chances of defeating him truly were. The Free Peoples of Middle-earth had to be united. But was that even possible in a world divided by fear, distrust, and greed? The mystery was no longer just about the ring. It was about the very heart of Middle-earth itself. Could the light of hope endure when faced with the darkness of Sauron's return? Could the Free Peoples find the strength to stand together, knowing the ring's power would always threaten to tear them apart? These were questions Gandalf would have to answer, and soon, before it was too late. The stage was set for confrontation far greater than any the world had ever known. The only question that remained was whether Middle-earth would be ready. The weight of the One Ring lay heavy on Gandalf's heart as he watched the Fellowship form before him. The discovery of the ring, its dark history, and its connection to Sauron had set the stage for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of Middle-earth. But now that the truth was known, and the ring was in the hands of Frodo, the burden of guiding the Fellowship had fallen squarely upon Gandalf's shoulders. He knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. Every step, every decision could tip the balance between victory and ruin. He could feel the weight of the knowledge pressing against him, not just in the sense of what he had to do, but in the uncertainty of it all. Even with the truth now known, Gandalf was not certain of the outcome. He had always believed that wisdom, unity, and courage would prevail over evil. But as he looked upon the faces of the Fellowship, each one filled with determination, but also fear, he realized that this fight would be unlike any other. The Free Peoples of Middle-earth had had long been divided. And now those very forces that had kept them apart, fear, distrust, and the lure of power, stood as obstacles in the path toward their salvation. Gandalf could not ignore the divisions within the fellowship itself. The dwarves, the elves, the men, they all had their own histories, their own grievances. Even Frodo, the ring-bearer, though pure of heart, could not escape the weight of the ring's power. The shadows of mistrust and doubt lingered in the corners of their minds, threatening to tear them apart. Gandalf's role as a guide had never been more critical. The weight of the ring was no longer just a physical one. It was a moral and spiritual burden, one that the free peoples of Middle-earth would have to carry together. Gandalf knew that his wisdom, though invaluable, was but a small part of the greater struggle. The true strength of the Fellowship, and indeed of all Middle-earth, would come not from their armies or their weapons, but from their unity in the face of overwhelming darkness. As Gandalf reflected on his role, he could not escape the deep sense of doubt that gnawed at him. Even with all the wisdom and knowledge at his disposal, he could not control the outcome. He could not dictate the hearts of men, or force the elves to trust the dwarves, or make Frodo's burden any lighter. In the end, it was the choices of the individuals that would determine the fate of Middle-earth, and that was a responsibility that Gandalf could not bear alone. His wisdom could guide them, but it could not carry them. The deepening threat of Sauron, hidden for so long, had become undeniable. The very land was poisoned by his influence, and the ring, with its power to corrupt, had the potential to undo everything the Fellowship fought for. Gandalf understood that it was not just a physical battle they would face, but a battle for the soul of Middle-earth. Sauron's power was more than a simple desire for domination. It was a force that twisted the very nature of things, warping good into evil, light into shadow. And yet, even with this knowledge, Gandalf was forced to rely on others to carry the burden, others who were, just like him, fraught with doubt, fear, and their own personal struggles. As Gandalf watched the Fellowship make their way toward Rivendell, the weight of their responsibility seemed to press down on him. The ring had found its way into the world once again, and with it, the inevitable war that would shape the future of all who inhabited Middle-earth. He had known the darkness would return, but even his experience and wisdom could not have prepared him for the toll it would take, not just on the land, but on the hearts of those who were meant to fight against it. Gandalf had always known that the struggle against Sauron would require the free peoples of Middle-earth to come together. But now that the ring was out in the open, he realized that the task before them was far more complicated than he had imagined. He had always thought that wisdom and unity could overcome any evil, but now, in the face of Sauron's growing strength, he was not so sure. The darkness that loomed over Middle-earth was not just an external force. It was inside the hearts of those who sought power, those who sought to possess the ring. Even the Fellowship, with all their noble intentions, was vulnerable to that corruption. But there was one thing Gandalf knew for certain. The time for secrecy was over. He had kept his knowledge hidden for too long, but now he could no longer remain silent. The Fellowship needed to understand the full scope of the danger they faced, and more importantly, they needed to understand what the ring truly was. Only then could they begin to understand the true nature of the evil they would be up against. As Gandalf made his way through the mountains, his mind was filled with the knowledge of the ring and its dark legacy. He knew that their journey was only beginning, but the road ahead was long, fraught with peril, and filled with uncertainty. He had no answers, no certainty, only the knowledge that the free peoples of Middle-earth must stand together, or fall apart in the face of Sauron's darkness. In the end, it would not be strength or wisdom that would defeat Sauron, but the unity of the heart. As Gandalf reflected on the immediate consequences of the ring's discovery, he could not help but feel the weight of its implications. The destruction of the ring was the only way to defeat Sauron once and for all. But the task was so much more complicated than anyone realized. It was not just a matter of finding the ring. It was about overcoming the lure of its power, the temptation that had corrupted so many before. Gandalf knew that the greatest challenge the Fellowship would face was not the battles ahead, but the battle within themselves. The darkness of Sauron was not just an external force. It was a part of every heart, every soul, and the greatest danger was the temptation to use the ring's power for their own ends. Gandalf's thoughts turned to the future, and to the role he would play in the events to come. He could not walk this path alone. The free peoples of Middle-earth, though divided, would have to unite if they were to stand a chance against Sauron. The struggle ahead would require them to put aside their differences, to cast aside their fear and distrust, and to fight together for the future of the world. And it was Gandalf's responsibility to guide them on that path. But even as Gandalf walked forward, a part of him could not shake the feeling that, despite all their efforts, the darkness of Sauron would never truly fade. It would always be a part of the world, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to rise again. The battle for Middle-earth was far from over, and the outcome was uncertain. But Gandalf knew one thing. The fight for hope, for light, would continue, no matter the cost. The legacy of the ring was one of corruption and despair, but it was also a testament to the strength of the free peoples, their willingness to fight for something greater than themselves, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Gandalf knew that as long as there was hope, the darkness would never fully consume Middle-earth. The strength of the free peoples, their unity, and their unwavering courage would be the final defense against Sauron's return. It was a long road ahead,